Well, I want to start with something that probably doesn't feel super right when you first hear it. Kind of par for the course when it comes to this show. Growth doesn't primarily come from doing things in your comfort zone or even in comfortable little increments, small baby steps. Yes, there's some truth to the idea that we can build on things gradually, that we can learn things bit by bit, piece by piece. But here's what that approach I think misses. When you learn in small steps while staying wrapped in your comfort zone, you still are insulated. You still have an out. You still have a part of your world you can retreat to when things get hard. Real growth, the kind that actually transforms you, that actually changes your perspective, your outlook, that builds capability and confidence you can feel all the way into your bones. That lives somewhere else entirely. It lives in the deep end, right? And we talk about this phrase all the time, going deep, going into the deep end of the pool, right? Not just dipping your toe in or staying in the shallows. And I know that's not what you want to hear most of the time, or something maybe we hear a lot. Oftentimes, people talk about going in gradually, building up, step by step. Most of the time, that message is to make it manageable, to make it bite-sized goals, to get you started on the journey. And you're going to understand, hopefully in this episode, that discomfort and that feeling of discomfort you feel when you first start is actually one of the most important signals you can have, because it is going to come. And yes, you may get that from the baby steps, from the starting, from the simple steps, but it really comes when you're fully immersed in the experience. Let me talk about this biologically, because the research here is pretty clear. There's something called the learning zone model. It divides experience into three zones: the comfort zone, the learning zone or the growth zone, we've heard that phrase before, and the panic zone. The comfort zone is where everything is familiar and routine. You know what to expect, you know what you're capable of, and because there's no real challenge or change, there's no real growth. Not really. Your brain isn't being forced to adapt. It's pretty comfortable where it's at, hence the comfort zone. Your capabilities aren't really expanding. You're just running the same program on repeat. And you get, frankly, very good at it. The panic zone is on the other extreme, right? The challenge is so overwhelming, your nervous system goes into survival mode, you start freaking out, and you can't think clearly. And at that point, you're not really operating at your best level. You can't learn, you're just trying to get through it. Then there's the growth zone. And this is right in the middle. It's that zone where it's uncomfortable, it's hard, it's difficult, and this is where the discomfort is real, but it's productive, right? You're being asked to do something harder than you've ever done before or harder than you expect, but it's not so hard that you collapse under the pressure. Your brain actually releases a neurochemical called BDNF, brain-derived nootropic factor, in response to this kind of optimal challenge. And BDNF is what enables neuroplasticity, and it's the substance your brain uses to build new connections and actually rewire itself. And it gets triggered specifically by difficult things that are not terrible, but they are going to overwhelm you a little bit. Or rather, it's produced by things that are difficult, they're hard, but not necessarily overwhelming or debilitating. So at a purely neurological level, growth requires discomfort, not panic. Not comfort, productive discomfort. That real stretch where you're pushed beyond your boundaries. Here's what actually happens with most people, and I think this is where I really want to dive in. And I want to be honest about it because I've seen it pretty constantly, pretty reoccurringly. I think there's a lot of people where they're not really experiencing difficulty and hardship. Let's be honest, we live in a pretty great world. We live in a pretty great time. We live in a pretty convenient time. And yeah, we have hardships here and there. And for people who maybe don't live in the United States or maybe don't live in a third world country, it may be completely different. It probably is. But for the most part, if you're living in the technological age we are, life is pretty great. And we all have our challenges. We all live in different aspects of life and different circumstances. But for the most part, even those in the worst of circumstances are living better than people 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's just, we have access to so much. And I don't think we appreciate that nearly as much as we should. But because of that, sometimes we don't have the need to push ourselves. If you think about it, anciently, survival meant something completely different than it does today. You know, in general, our idea of survival is, can we make a little more money so we can go on a trip? Can we provide for, our few kids and, feed them a little bit better or get them into that sports program that we wish they could be a part of? That's survival. Like if we can't provide those type of needs, then we're not really providing. But, 200 years ago, that could have meant we literally are going to starve and die because we couldn't find anything to eat. Completely different story, right? The truth is people do the bare minimum to feel like they're growing without actually committing to the discomfort the real growth requires. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think comfort's nice. We were raised to try and create environments that help us survive and stay comfortable, not build environments where we need to face discomfort. That's not what we necessarily are built to do. Most people take a course on a topic instead of actually starting something in that space, right? Or they read about public speaking instead of giving the speech. They prepare forever instead of doing. And when we get into this comfort zone, that's when we start just having ideas but never taking the action, because it requires us to break out of that comfort and have a flavor of discomfort. And the moment they feel, or we feel, even an ounce of growth, even a small flicker of progress, we stop, right? We start to think that we've accomplished what could have been accomplished. And we make the mistake of realizing that uncomfortable feeling is actually just the edge of our comfort zone. And it's not the ceiling of our potential. That's where we need to break through, right there, right then. But that little feeling of growth, that's not where we need to stop. That's the signal that you've reached the starting line and you need to push forward. It's our body telling us that we are right there and we are ready to continue the work. But the problem is because we've trained ourselves to be comfortable, and we've trained ourselves to interpret the feeling of being stretched or being overwhelmed or being anxious or whatever it may be as a warning, as something to manage or reduce. That's when, once we feel that first discomfort, we back away. We stop pursuing the goal, or we pump the brakes. I was talking to a family member actually just recently, and they're younger. They're just recently out of high school. And once again, high school, very insulated bubble. Yeah, it has its challenges, but for the most part, it's pretty insulated. You kind of have your friends, you have your people, you have your community, and everything's for the most part figured out, what you're doing. And they're coming out of school and they hadn't done a whole lot with their life, as most high school students have. There's not a whole lot that they've really experienced. Everything's pretty new. And at this point, they've been with their familiar environment, their familiar people, their friends, their family. Everything's just kind of been laid out. And then they got dropped into something completely different. They're away from home. They're away from everything familiar. They're generally in the deep end of the pool for the first time. They're in that deep end, something completely unexpected. And they had had a few jobs here and there. They had had experiences where they were working and experiencing new things, but they still had the comforts of home. They still had the comforts of family and friends that they knew that they could always return to. And here's what I told them, because as they went into this thing for the first time, completely away from everything common and comfortable, what showed up? Fear. Real fear, tangible fear, anxiety about whether they could handle what they were trying to do. And they had genuine doubt about their abilities, nerves that they hadn't really felt before, at least not to this extent. And here's what I told them, and here's what I really want you guys to hear, is those feelings are not signs that you're on the wrong path. Sometimes we think that. Sometimes we get anxious or nervous or uncomfortable and we think, oh, well, this isn't what I'm supposed to do. What I'm supposed to do is feel fun, and what I'm supposed to do is supposed to bring me happiness and joy and comfort and all these amazing feelings, but nothing really does that. Not all the way. Everything worth having has some aspect that you're gonna be uncomfortable with because it's new. Being bad at something or being new at something always has its disadvantages. And those feelings, in my opinion, rather than seeing them as a negative, you should take them as a sign that you're on the right path. Because those feelings only show up when you're being tested. They only show up when you've been asked to do something actually bigger than what you've done before. That fear and that anxiety is, in this context, aren't warning signals to run. I get it. If you're like running from a bear and you feel anxious and nervous, understandable. That is there to warn you. But in this case, it's not. It's there. It's evidence that you're in the zone where growth lives and you're about to experience change. You see, we've gotten it backwards. We think that this discomfort is telling us something is wrong. But in most cases, at least what I've seen, it's telling us something is right. It's telling us we are in unfamiliar territory and to forge ahead. My family member didn't know what their capabilities were because they've never been tested at this level. And they had been confident in every other thing that they had done because it was something that they expected. At some point they started new, but for a long time it had been comfortable. And so this situation was really pushing them to go outside beyond themselves. And it was cool to talk to them and see this growth firsthand. Right now, I'm competing in a bodybuilding competition. And while I'm not necessarily, I don't know if I'll win or I'll lose or what the case will be, I'm not really doing it for that purpose. I'm really doing it more to challenge myself. I've worked out for many a year. I've always been into athletics and fitness. I think it's a great way to push yourself. But I need something more. I need something that was going to challenge me beyond what I had currently done. And this really has. It's forced me to push my limits, push my boundaries, push what I'd done in the past, even the dieting, the training, to a whole new level. And it genuinely has been a little nerve-wracking, but also a good and cool experience to feel. And it felt timely in this topic that we're talking about because I've recently been feeling feelings of being pushed past my comfort zone and forcing myself to grow. So here's the distinction that separates the people who actually grow from the ones who just feel like they're growing. Commitment. When you partially commit to something, when you go into a challenging situation but keep one foot in the comfort zone as an escape hatch to get away, your nervous system knows it. You know that you have that option. It's running in survival mode because it knows an exit being left open for you to run to. And the discomfort feels paralyzed because part of you is waiting for permission to leave, right? You're wondering in the back of your head, like, well, should I really even stick this out? Should I just, I probably, this sucks. I don't want to do this. I can just leave. I'll go home, right? And that almost is more paralyzing. How can you ever fully get something out of something if you don't commit to it? If you're always leaving the door open to run away. But when you fully commit, when you say, I'm in this all the way until I figure it out, something fundamentally shifts. The same level of discomfort becomes productive instead of paralyzing. Your brain stops looking for that exit, stops looking for reasons to get out, and it starts solving the problem and making you better. This is why people who get dropped in the deep end with no option to retreat, who are truly all in on what they're doing, grow much faster and more durably than people who wade in gradually. Not because they're tougher, but because they're committed. And that commitment tells your brain that this is real, this matters, and we are going to figure it out. And that's a whole different ballgame. That's a game changer. Half commitment doesn't produce full growth. It produces the illusion of growth. That ounce of progress that makes you feel like you've done enough when you've barely started. That's what it does. It robs you of the true experience. So here's what I want to leave you with today, keeping it kind of short and sweet. If you are feeling fear about something right now, if you're anxious, if you're uncomfortable, if you're genuinely unsure whether you can do something, don't retreat from that feeling. Sit with it for just a second and ask yourself honestly, is this panic or is this the growth? Is this the stretch? Is this the thing I need? I tell you, if you have an idea, if you have something that fits those parameters that you feel like is a little nerve-wracking, makes you uncomfortable, maybe scares you a little bit, and you're wondering if you should pursue, how long have you been thinking about this idea? If it's more than a week or two, or it's 3 weeks, there might be something to that. There's always a reason why we get the ideas and the feelings we get to go and do things. And if you continuously think about it, you're working on trying to solve it, give into it, go for it, try it out, and realize that this feeling of panic might actually be the thing you need. Because if it's stretch, if this is a version of you being tested, a version of you being required to figure something out that you haven't figured out before, that's not a signal to leave. That's the signal you're exactly where you need to be. Stay in it, go all the way, and find out what you're actually capable of. If you live this whole life staying in your comfort zone, aren't you going to look back and regret and wonder what you could have been or who you could have became? I know I would. Give into the commitment. Be okay with the panic, with the anxious feelings, with the nerves. Realize that everybody feels those feelings. And the ones that can sit with it, commit to it, and reap the benefit are the ones that get ahead.